Good morning. Sitting here thinking today about as I was just leaving Bible college and starting our church in 1982. I was thinking about some of the things that I watched change over the years, and certainly there's been a lot of changes. A nation that has come to accept horrible, vile, perverse behavior, and not only um, acting as if it's okay, but pushing it on us, families and schools, and there's a lot of vulgar changes, patriotism, a lot of those kind of things. But in the Christian world, there's been a lot of changes too. And I remember when I was first attending Dr. Heil's pastor school, he'd packed that auditorium out, thousands of people and preachers from all over the country. And in many cases, the preachers were from they were from denominations. We were independent Baptists, where each of our churches are independent. We're not in a denomination. Nobody's over anybody. But there were Nazarenes, there were Pentecostals, Assembly of God, different people from different groups. And it would surprise you to know how many people followed him, Dr. Jack Hiles, from all kinds of groups of people. And by the time, I don't know, 30 years, by the time of his death, most of these other groups had stopped coming. The size of his ministry, the impact, the huge impact of their church on America, people began to realize the price paid to be that was more than they were willing to pay. Often people come to our church and they see our young people, they see the atmosphere, they hear the hymns, they hear harmony and melody. It's not a rock concert, it's not a light show, it's church. And they like that. And then they find out the price tag, what it takes to get it, and the preaching and the holiness and the separated living, and then they often go back realizing maybe they'd rather have something else, which is wonderful about being free people. We can choose. But I watched this, our circle of independent Baptist people stayed straight. The crowds peeled off little by little because they just weren't sure they really wanted that straight-laced kind of Christianity all that much. But it's understandable. They were Protestant in their background. Baptists have never been Protestant. Some of them were denominationally tied, and for whatever reason, and they're good people, many people saved, and just differences. So they logically, they pulled out. And so by the time of Brother Hiles' death, the crowd got more and more focused, I guess, on a group of, the people who graduated from his schools, the people that were trained by him, more and more of them were coming. And like us, we'd bring crowds of people with us, sometimes 10, 20, 30 people with us, all the way to Hammond, Indiana, to the conference. And so his graduates, each year a few more people graduate, they start churches, take churches, they start bringing them there to Hammond. And so as people pulled out going another direction, the attendance grew with his own people, but the diversity of people got more and more narrow. And I remember him saying, toward the last, 5 years, maybe 10 years, but at least the last 5 years, each generation is going to have fight their own battle for the King James Bible. And each generation is going to have to take a stand. And the fight is going to be the same as it was 20 years ago and 50 years ago. And there's some areas. And so among that group of independent Baptists, is interesting to me the last 20 years to see that now those independent Baptists peel off. And they're just not sure they're willing to pay the price. Our stand for modesty in apparel, for separated living, and there's a lot of pastors who will live a separated life, but they're not going to preach it. My home pastor in Reading, he was clean. He was a good, godly, holy man. And his theology was right, and his separation from the world was right. He would never have long hair, but he wouldn't say anything about long hair from the pulpit. Um, he was very strong Baptist. But one day he introduced me to one of his Sunday school teachers, and I was just early in the ministry. It was probably 1984, 1986, somewhere in there. And I was up there preaching for him, and this lady came by, chatted for a minute, went our way, said, "Now, that's a great lady. Now, she's a Pentecostal, but she told me she'd never speak in tongues in Sunday school. And she teaches a kids class." And so though he was very straight, he wasn't going to put his foot down on some things. And we always had a King James Bible. He did, and he taught us from that. But there were a lot of Bibles in that church. And so there's a lot of preachers who the last 20 years, they've kind of drifted here and there because they're just not willing to put their foot down on soul winning, on the King James Bible, on separated Christian living, whatever it might be. And they're not bad people. It's just people starting to filter out to where they're comfortable doing what they're doing. There are a lot of churches now that they're not going soul winning. Let's just once a month go out and pass out tracts. Well, I'm for that. But the rest of the month, let's go soul winning. Let's see people saved. I love that in a church like ours, we've got people leading folks to Christ. I mean, people in their 70s out. They don't walk very fast. They don't walk very far, but every once in a while they'll come in, got to lead people to Christ here, or they go to the rest home. And some of our people going to the rest home are old enough to be in the rest home, and they're leading people to Christ, and the jails and all these different areas where people are getting saved. I love that. We would have lost all that if we just had, let's go out and pass out tracts once a month. Let's do door hangers. Well, I'm for door hangers, but not to not go soul winning. That's in addition to going soul winning. But again, time goes on, and I watched my pastor. I watched Dr. Hiles. He just stayed straight, and a lot of difficulties in life, but he just stayed straight. Losing people who were once close to you, but he stayed straight. People would splinter off, and he stayed straight. And now, for the last 40 years since we've started our church, we are what we've been. And in fact, we're probably a little stronger. I'm probably a little stronger, not on the King James Bible, but maybe on being a Baptist. I think I've learned a lot the last 15 years about being a Baptist that I was never taught before. Kind of learned it along the way, getting to know people, reading. Now I've got a whole library of books just on our Baptist heritage, and I've learned. I've always had a stand on the King James Bible, but I didn't always know why. Now I've got a whole section of my library on there, King James Bible, and why. And so I've gotten some maybe a little stronger, but I've had people that we're still friends at a distance. And it's better for them and better for me, because I don't want to fuss with my friends. And I love the people of God. And it's good that God allows us to be different. He says, let every man be fully persuaded. And I've got a little pamphlet I wrote on being fully persuaded. And you find that there in the scriptures. And he talks about you prefer one day above another, and in Christ all days the same, and you prefer careful dietary rules, and we just say all things are clean. He said, just let every man be fully persuaded in his own heart. That's amazing. God, a God who is perfect in holiness, fearful in praises, that God who's perfect says, that's all right. You can stand here, you can stand there, you can stand here. Long hair on men. You read in 1 Corinthians 11, it says, if a man have long hair, it's a shame, period. End of subject. It's a shame. Even nature teaches you that a man shouldn't have long hair. And then a verse or two later, he says, now, if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither in the church of God. All right, well, this is what's right. We know this is what's right, but don't fight. Let them go over there with their long hair, and you stay straight. But we're not enemies. And I want to keep a heart for people. Folks, there's folks that don't like me. I still like them. I've decided I'm going to like the people of God because they're the ones God has an affection for. And I've just decided I'm going to like them. Today, there's a little song that I don't know if our children's workers teach it anymore, but When we first started the church, my wife did a lot of the Sunday school work. I helped a lot with it. We taught them this little song, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. And then be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, little hands, what you touch. For the Father up above is looking down in love. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. And I think it would sure be good if Christians did that. I mean, Christian adults. And I don't mean singing the song, I mean practicing the song. I was thinking of two, maybe three stories. I'm not going to turn to it, 2 Samuel chapter 11, if you want to turn to it. 2 Samuel 11, you find David on the roof, and he's out looking, and he sees Bathsheba. And he looks into who she is and ends up conceiving a child with this lady. And tragedy follows. See, he saw. And that was the first problem. He saw something. He shouldn't have been looking. If he did see, he should have looked away. You can't go through this life and not have a glimpse. And you just look away. And you can either gaze on it. Someone said, I can't keep a bird from landing on my head, but I can keep it from building a nest there. Well, that's what it's like with thoughts. This is a dirty old world. I'm going to see indiscretion, but I don't have to break my neck keeping my eyes on it as it passes by. The next story is Samson. And over in Judges chapter 14, Samson saw this gal. And he'd never even spoken to her like David. He just saw her and he said to his parents, give me that girl. He didn't know she could. He had no telling what this girl was like. But what a mess Samson made of his life because he saw things. In the story of Joshua 7, Joshua had taken the people of Israel across the Jordan River. They are marching around Jericho each day. And the command was, when the walls come down, everything in that city is dedicated to God. We keep nothing. It's either killed or it's put into the church treasury. We'd call it church treasury. But, and there's a guy named Achan, and in Judges 7:21 tells a story if you want to look it up. But Achan sees a beautiful garment, a wedge of gold, a bunch of valuable things, and he sneaks them out. Now, it's a city. The walls come down. The soldiers are in. How he did it, I don't know. But somehow he got those things, took them back to his tent and buried them, and then, went back to the fray or whatever. I have no idea all the details. But he saw, and he said, I saw and I coveted and I took them. And there's three stories. Samson wanted a girl. David wanted a girl. And Achan wanted some gold. And those are probably pretty much at least two of the three things that matter to men is gold and women. And then a man's pride. I want the admiration and respect. I want people to think I'm wonderful, even though I might be a total loser. But you look at those stories, and with those stories in mind, and we all know this. We all know that what we see affects us. That's why all the billboards have advertising, because what we see affects us. Why the TV commercials, Super Bowl ads, those things affect our behavior. And what amazes me, especially for Christians, knowing how powerful our eyes are in influencing our behavior, is that people have a problem when I fuss at them about getting your kids off the internet. Or I fuss at them about getting our kids off of video games where they're hearing and involved in video games with people who knows what kind of perverse and vile people around the world. It's different when you got your kid and the neighbor kid, you know them both, and they're playing a game of Mario Kart in the living room, compared to a guy who's got these visual things and audio things, and he's playing some guy in Tibet, and who knows what garbage is on the screen. Parents don't keep up with video games, and kids play. But I'm surprised about how bothered people are when I preach strongly on keeping things clean in our home. Shut it off. Right now, Congress is fussing over TikTok, this social media platform, because China is using that to monitor things that are going on. They think it's a national security thing. And of course, we know that Twitter and YouTube were heavily involved, or Facebook, they were heavily involved in both our response to COVID and the elections, the last presidential elections. And these things affect us, what we see. I guarantee you, TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube had nothing to do with my voting. I base my voting on the Word of God. I'm not going to vote for you if you're not pro-life. I'm not going to vote for you if you're not pro-Israel. I'm not going to vote for you if you're not pro-freedom, freedom of speech and freedom of religion. I'm not going to vote for you if you're not Second Amendment, freedom to bear arms. These are all biblical principles. You say, where's freedom to bear arms? Oh, it's in, Jesus told the disciples, if you don't have a sword, sell your coat and get one. Jesus thought a weapon was more valuable than a coat. Go figure that one out, the people who are against protecting yourselves. But if you're not pro-family, I'm not going to vote for you. If you're stupid, I'm not going to vote for you. And I know people say you shouldn't use the word stupid. Well, don't. I am. I think it's a very appropriate term. If you don't understand there's just two genders, you've got issues, and I'm not voting for someone like that. So Twitter's not going to affect me, but people agree these things. Of course, I'm not on any of those social media things, but we need to understand how much it matters, and it's not just that. Over in Matthew chapter 4, Jesus said, "Take heed how you hear." You be careful how you hear, because it's going to affect and how you respond to what you hear. It is so important. Now, what we hear and what we listen to is going to affect our philosophies, maybe, where what we see and touch is going to affect, our greed or covetousness or whatever it might be, for like David for Bathsheba or Achan for gold. But, it does matter. It's like preaching. There's an ambiance in a nice restaurant. Take Taco Bell food, put it in a candlelit restaurant with beautiful tablecloths and waiters and waitresses in Mexican dress, and you got Don Jose's, and you just triple the price. And I know some of you think it's a lot different, but beans and rice and some meat and tortillas, that's about, what variation is there? But the ambiance matters. It matters with preaching too. And I have something I believe church ought to be. It's what I've taught. It's what I believe the scriptures teach. And that's what I want church to be. That's what I want preaching to be. This set of things that I'm not dealing with here. But I took some of our young people, young adults, to a meeting out of town. And we heard a guy preach 2 or 3 sermons, and nice guy, and a guy that I would guess he'd sort of run in our circles. I'm guessing, as best as I know. But you know what? He smiled the whole time. He smiled like Bill Clinton and Gavin Newsom. He smiled all the time. Smiled. And that I remember, never preached on sin. And never mentioned sin. Never stepped on a toe. Never told anybody to get right. It was all kind of warm and fuzzy, encouraging. And everything he said was good. But I want preaching to say, "Thus saith the Lord." Preaching ought to push people to holiness. It ought to raise our standard of personal discretion and propriety and holy living. It ought to raise us up from an unforgiving spirit. It ought to raise us up to a life separate from the world. See, Paul told Timothy in his preaching, he is to reprove and to rebuke and to exhort. Exhortation is only 1/3 of preaching. Reproving and rebuking is 2/3 of preaching. So I wouldn't bring any of our folks back to hear that guy. And the church is a great church. Pastor is amazing. I've had him preach for me. He's a great man, and honored to be his friend. But this guest preacher, as nice a guy as he is, I don't want our young people, our young adults, because I don't want our adults I don't want them to get thinking that preaching is pablum. Preaching is easily digested, and it's soft and nice and everything hunky-dory, and whatever that word means. Preaching is to reprove and to rebuke. Preaching should be to push you to holiness. And the Old Testament prophets were to show my people their transgressions. And so what we see, it matters. Over in Acts chapter 4, somebody came to the apostles and said, "Now we told you not to talk about Jesus." And he said, "We cannot but speak the things which we've seen and heard." You see, what we see and hear, it affects us. And And I don't want our folks getting comfortable with preachers that never name sin, because we're sinners. And I don't care how good a Christian you are, we need kicked in the behind once in a while and be pushed to do right. And we need, in our marriage, we need to be pushed. And in our personal walk with God, we need to be pushed. In Bible memory and prayer and soul winning and church building and memory work and Sunday school and bus ministry. We need that go get something done for God. And I don't want my folks to think, there's other churches where everybody's always nice and warm and polite and kind and nobody yells at you. I don't want them thinking that's what church is, because it's not New Testament. It's not what the Lord said. Man, John the Baptist, he was brutal. Jesus was really brutal. And these Old Testament prophets, they were rough. John the Baptist had his head chopped off because he was preaching on morals and decency and calling out the governor's name from the pulpit. And oh my. So our children, we should be so careful what our children see. You're at a relative's house. Summer vacations coming up. Oh, be careful where you go. Now, me, I love the beach. I grew up, we were at the beach a lot. Oh, I love the ocean. And, that's probably where I learned to swim. But, if you've never had the ocean tumble you in a wave and spew you out on the ground and sand in your eyes and your ears and your mouth and your belly button and every pocket, we just have cut off jeans and you shaking the sand out of your pockets. You didn't have a fun day. And, but as a Christian, as a father, we would be very guarded. We'd go to the beach. We'd go looking. We'd go on odd days when there weren't so many people around. We'd find beaches where there weren't people. Maybe we could see one person way down there, somebody there. But I'm not going to put my boys and girls around a bunch of folks in colored underwear and call it acceptable. And I don't go through life, hollering at them as I walk by any more than I would go by a liquor store throwing a rock through the window. I'm not going to do that. We do believe in freedom. But be careful, little eyes, what you see. I think some of our dads need to be more careful what's on that television. You watching football, good, watch football. Have that controller in your hand when the cheerleaders pop in. Have that quick change thing so you can go to a dead station or whatever. But these cheerleaders, they're dressed seductively on purpose, and they wiggle seductively on purpose, and they're not out there to get the crowd to cheer. And the TV is pushing indiscretion and inappropriate. It's breaking down the barriers of discretion and propriety and modesty. And we need, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Now, we can do that also in the area of covetousness, looking at new cars and looking at new houses and new furniture. Oh, what's wrong with the old furniture? Oh, it's old. Is it worn out? No. Is it uncomfortable? No. But I want new stuff. Be careful, be careful, be careful. You hear these romantic stories of the prince and the pauper and the girl who's a princess and she marries the stable boy, and you love all those romantic things. It's not realistic. Their lives are too different. And I don't think I should have close friends that are millionaires. I don't mind. I've had a friend or two that were very rich, but we couldn't spend a lot of time together. I'm simple. I'm either going to start wanting what they have, or they're going to start looking down on me because of what a loser I am, because I like McDonald's. I want to stay simple. And I would always be friendly to those, but we should be very careful that we don't hang around people who are going to want us, that are not going to create a covetousness in our heart for things we should have. Married people should be very guarded about how many single people they're friends with. You're 20, 25 years old, 30 years old, and you're a married couple, and you hang around with these single people. You can't live like they live. You don't have the liberties they do. You don't have the liberties to go and to be out late and to run long hours and do crazy things and to date multiple people. Those days are gone for you. And if your eyes see them, you could get thinking, maybe being married isn't all it's made up to be. Oh, no, marriage is way better than being single. But you be careful, little eyes, what you see. Let's guard our eyes. David saw and messed up his life. Achan saw and messed up his life, and his children and marriage and everything. Samson in the Judges saw. Oh, be careful. Let's guard our eyes.